Warning. The following content may contain elements that are not suitable for some audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, good night, whatever you are. We're back live. 2 weeks off. I almost didn't make it, but I'm here, ready to talk to you, ready to talk to my guests, ready to do everything that we need to do. Thank you for your patience. A couple technical roadblocks, hampers, issues, but we're here today, and we're gonna have a fantastic show. I'll make it quick. Let me see this really quick. If I can, I wasn't ready. So next week we're talking to Lauren Vargas about featuring. Week after that, Bob Stutz and I are having a discussion of the next enterprise, and then we're in May. So that's all because we're running behind. Let me intro very, very briefly my guest today, which I'm really, really excited to have on the show. 25 years ago and then some, there was a series of essays published online that then became a book. The book name was a Cluetrain Manifesto, and it was truly a game changer for the enterprise marketing and the internet. And my guest today is one of the 4 authors of the book. His name is Doug Searls, and he's more than I can ever tell you, so he'll introduce himself. And here's Doug.
Hi, Esteban.
Hey, Doug.
Thanks for having me. It's actually there was never an essay. There was a rant that went on the web on I think it was March 17th of 1999, and it was. And then that was so hot that it turned into a book. And
what was the rant about?
But the rant was about marketing, actually. Most people don't know. The Cluetrain Manifesto is basically an anti-marketing tract. The 3 of us, David Weinberger, Chris Locke, and I, were all basically journalists, and in David's case, more of an academic who consulted in the marketing area to the tech world. And the 4th of us, Rick Levine, was an actual techie. He worked for Sun Microsystems at the time. And I mean, this is really in the late stages of, we didn't know it at the time, of what we're now calling Web 1.0. This is when there was this early explosion of possibility on the net. And we basically saw Web 2.0 coming without knowing that's what it was, and had a big rant against it. That Chris Locke actually, what happened is a conversation between that Chris Locke knew me, and he knew David Weinberger, and he knew Rick Levine. So Chris is really the nexus of this thing. And he was in Boulder, Colorado. I was in Silicon Valley, and David was in roughly Cambridge, Mass. So we were 3 very different places. And Chris pulled us together because we were having separate phone conversations about what was really going on with the internet. I mean, all of us saw the internet before it came, and when it came, we're totally into it with both feet and our whole lives, and saw it as a sea change for all of civilization. We just saw it as this changes everything, and we wanted that respected, and we wanted to make the most of it in all kinds of positive ways. And so Chris, at one point in our conversations, sent out a little graphic that said, "We are not seats or eyeballs or end users or consumers. We are human beings, and our reach exceeds your grasp. Deal with it." And the your grasp was the marketers out there, right? And and that galvanized us. That totally adrenalized us to do something. So we decided we're going to put something up on the net. I'd mentioned that my own personal way of filtering out marketing clients for myself was, here's my logic of marketing. Markets are conversations. Conversation is fire, and therefore marketing is arson. So if you want fires set, I'm your guy. If you just want press releases, I'm not. And Chris said, well, great. Well, let's set some fires then. Let's just set a fire out there. And we decided to put up this thing that became the Cluetrain Manifesto. The name Cluetrain came from a joke, which is that about a Silicon Valley company for which the Cluetrain stopped there 4 times a day for 10 years, and they never took delivery. and I shared that joke or that one-liner, and they said, one of the guys said, Cluetrain, good name for a website. And I bought it on the spot for $75 from the Internet or whatever it was called at the time,
Yeah.
and or Network Solutions, and so then we had, and we made it a manifesto because that worked for Marx, and we came up with 95 theses because that worked for Luther, and that, and basically a rant. I mean, there were probably seven original. I mean,
That's right.
seven theses, as it were. In addition to that, that thing became the one clue that we are not seats or eyeballs or end users or consumers, went up top. Nobody ever quoted that, in part because they couldn't copy it. It was just a graphic, which is kind of a mistake, I think, but that's where it is. And Markets and Conversations became the first thesis, and that's the one that the marketers jumped onto. And that was my one-liner, but I've been saying that for 15, 20 years to no effect. And then once it was in the manifesto, it became enormous.
What was the original intent when you guys put that out? I mean, as we know now, you changed the way we actually congregate online. It's not that it changed it; it's just like identified it and then like made people pay attention, right?
Yeah, I think what we did with the manifesto is spoke of an emerging zeitgeist that was happening among everybody who kind of got with the importance of what this new medium was, that it was going to absorb all the rest of them, that we could already see it happening. I mean, it was going to replace ordinary publishing, recording, playback, artistry of every kind. It was just going to have all these amazing effects that were. We just felt that what it would do, especially, would liberate you and me, individuals, from corporate control. And pretty much everything that we saw happening came true, except being liberated from corporate control. I mean, it's 25 years later, so we are still seats, end users, eyeballs, and consumers, and our reach does not exceed their grasp. And the way we are dealing with it. But at this point, it's like the older I get, the earlier it seems. And it's sort of interesting that 3 of the 4 of us were already past 50 when we wrote this thing, and we're all in our 70s now. I mean, Chris is gone; he died like 3 or 4 years ago. But Rick Levine was a little bit younger, but he's an old guy now too. But it's I mean, it's interesting to me that before Twitter got half killed by Elon Musk.
No, it got totally killed, dude. Well, it doesn't exist anymore.
But the thing is, you could do a search for the word Cluetrain any day on Twitter, and it would be used a number of times every day.
Yeah.
And I mean, the word belongs in the Oxford Dictionary at this point. It's so widely used. It's, many thousands, millions, I don't know, of places that it's mentioned on that Google can find. I mean, it had effects. I mean, it was funny because there was no Twitter. Google was still just a search engine back then.
It was, yeah. But it started in 1997. So back in 1999, it was barely taking off. I mean,
it was barely taking off. I mean, Hotbot and Alta Vista and a bunch of other search engines were still preeminent, I think, at that time.
Yeah.
But the word spread. I mean, after we put up the manifesto, like a few days went by, and my emails went from like 20 a day to like a couple hundred. And then when the Wall Street Journal wrote a piece about it, mostly sourcing Chris, with a little picture of him on it, written by a guy named Tom Petzinger. It was a column of his on the front of what was then the marketplace section of the Wall Street Journal. My emails went up to hundreds a day and have never gone down. Now most of them are crap now, but but it was a meme. It was a meme, and it's still going. I mean, it's still loose in the world.
But what I mean, so if you go back to that time, and I would love to talk at the origin and then go forward, right? But if you go back at
Sure,
the time, what were the things that you noticed that made you think, okay, this is something? I'll give you my personal perspective. In
sure.
1993, when the commercial web was born, I worked at a bank, and my boss said, "Hey, get onto this." I was the go-to guy for all the new projects, and said,
Mm,
figure this out." And I had been working on the internet since the mid '80s when I was running computer labs and all that stuff and networking and
mm,
all that. And for the life of me, I could not figure out why anybody would want to be on that freaking internet at the time. It was all text with gophers and yellow
right.
pages,
Yeah.
impossible to find. So the commercial web brought something forward. I will be the first one to say I didn't see the impact that it eventually had. But by 95, 96, it was apparent something was going to happen. Netscape came on stage and everything. What were the things that you noticed back in 98, 99 when you started writing and talking about this that
Oh boy.
you said this is going to be something different?
Well, I give you a similar arc to my my awareness of it, and something similar happened with Chris and David
Mm-hmm.
Weinberger. Um, as far back as the 80s, I knew ARPANET was there. I knew there was this network that companies um, and governments could use
Right.
that ran on TCP/IP. Um, I I had a relationship with Novell through a guy named Craig Burton, who's now gone, sadly. Brilliant, brilliant, funny guy. He's the guy almost single-handedly responsible for Novell's success in the 80s. And in the early 90s, he had his own company called the Burton Group with Jamie Lewis and Craig's wife, Judith Burton, who came with him from Novell, and there was a whole drama around that. But the but back then, there were LANs, there were wide area networks, there were local area networks. They all competed. They came from different companies, and then there was CompuServe and AOL, all these online service
Mm-hmm.
companies. But and I used all of them. I was on AOL, I was on Prodigy, I was on CompuServe. When I traveled elsewhere in the world, um, I carried phone plugs. Here's one for France. Here's one for the UK. Here's one it'll work in New Zealand and Australia if I switch these two wires with alligator clips and then call it on a local number to get on CompuServe. And um, and that was, I mean, CompuServe could have killed on the internet, but it saw itself as a competitor.
Yeah.
But we saw TCP/IP. Craig Burton told me TCP/IP is the thing that connects all of this. TCP/IP is going to win, and I saw what was going to happen when that happened, and then, but for me, I waited. Even actually thinking about it, I worked for Hitachi Semiconductor, and oh my God, I tried to get them to switch from SGML to HTML and a bunch of things, shit like that. But anyway, it was 95. I mean, when, or 94, when I saw Mosaic, and it was at Esther Dyson's conference,
Mm-hmm.
and John Gage, then of Sun Microsystems, showed Mosaic and the graphical web at work. I never used links because I could never get on the net. Chris could get on the net. He was working for IBM at the time, and he used Lynx as his browser, LYNX. It was a text
Mm-hmm.
browser, and I think go for an FTP and stuff like that. I was able to do, but it awaited the graphical internet with um, uh, with Netscape, and not Netscape, with Mosaic. And I got on first with, I forget, a company called Netcom, I think. It was my first ISP in San Jose. It was a toll call from Palo Alto or San Carlos, where I lived. But then one called BatNet in Palo Alto showed up in early 95. And that's when I bought Searls.com. I started buying domain names.
Mm.
When they were really expensive. But I was able to make a non-toll call into BatNet and got on with dial-up. And then I got on full-time using Ricochet, which is a wireless system that existed only for a few years. But I was able to be on full-time, and I could get an IP address, a static IP address. And that was awesome. So, and then when I moved to another place in the Bay Area, I had 16 fixed IP addresses, and I had a Linux server here, I had a Mac server here, and I started blogging. Dave Weiner got me blogging, but the sense that we had then was one of just like infinite possibility. You could just, even though not much was happening in the broader world, I could see this infinite possibility playing out. And I think with Cluetrain, we wanted to get ahead of it and speak
Yeah.
for people in this thing, and I was very optimistic about what marketing could do. But and this is where I kind of veered away from David and Chris a little bit. I really wanted to work on what the individual could do. And that's why I ended up writing The Intention Economy. That was my follow-up book. David Weinberger wrote 4 follow-up books. Chris wrote 2. And I'm sort of still on that case. I'm the one, I think, more than the other guys carrying the Cluetrain flag.
I think that, I mean, you said you wanted to get ahead, and indeed you did, because if you really follow the history, now we're in the mid odds, right? 2002,
Yeah.
3, 4, maybe 2005, blogs become something, communities become something. I mean, CompuServe.io dismantled, but Facebook and other social networks begin to emerge. So you were ahead of it. I mean, what were the years between the Cluetrain Manifesto, basically the dog birding it, and then seeing the growth of your idea into something?
2 things were going on that were huge for me. I mean, I was spoiled by having 2 kinds of success. 2 successes. One was I helped start Linux Journal when Linux hit 1.0 in 1994, and I became an editor, a contributing editor for them in '96, and eventually a full-time editor and editor-in-chief. My name was on the masthead of Linux Journal for 24 years, and during that time, like in early '98, a bunch of geeks, not including me, but they got together in a room and decided to call free software open source. And I worked really closely with Eric Raymond, who more than anybody else promulgated that theme. And I helped make open source a thing. So that Linux and open source and contributing to the success of those was just a wonderful thrill for me. And I got to see as Linux basically won. The Linux is just a huge success. I think some of the original ethos behind Linux is kind of missing now, but or sort of in abeyance a bit. But that was one, and Cluetrain was the other. Oh, and blogging. I was one of the earliest bloggers. I mean, I had written online before that, mostly because they couldn't get anybody to publish my stuff. But
Right.
I was too radical. I mean, I didn't want to. All the magazines wanted you to report on what I call vendor sports. Apple versus Microsoft. Who's going to win?
Yeah.
Commerce One versus I forget what the other one was. Yeah, no, it began with an A. I forget what it was, but they were like the big e-commerce companies, and and there were cover stories about those. And I didn't want to write about that stuff. I wanted to write about the deeper stuff that was actually going on. How is this changing ourselves? How is it changing our culture? How is this changing the way business actually works? What forms of commerce are going to be amplified and changed utterly, and which ones aren't? And I'm still all about that. I love infrastructure. I've done another success for me is photography, actually, though I'm not a fine art photographer. I shoot pictures out the windows of airplanes, and I publish them online, mostly on Flickr with permissive licensing so others can use it. And the things I look at are, where is radio going? They're cutting the towers down everywhere. Nobody's investing in radio anymore. And in the meantime, all of these shipping centers are going up around every airport, along every highway. Farms are being replaced by these shipping centers, and you think of them as warehouses, but they're not. They're called flow centers by the people in that business. So I'm very interested in that stuff, and the internet totally changed that. It's all the logistics that goes on there are invisible to ordinary people, but I just came to this office. There are 2 packages sitting outside the door.
Yeah.
The commerce comes to us. I went to the most successful mall in Southern California that's still going. It's in Santa Anita, and it's got a bunch of dead stores in it.
Yeah.
These things are changing. So I wanted to stay ahead of that stuff, and I'm kind of all over the map in describing what I'm doing here. But I'm
Yeah.
still the younger I get, the earlier it seems, though, because I think something Joey Ito said to me, and I asked him, what do you think the digital transition is bigger than? Is it bigger than movable type? Is it bigger than speech? He said it's the biggest thing since oxygenation, and that happened 2.5 billion years ago. And I think it
Really?
is. I think we are digital beings now. We're no longer physical beings alone. We live in a digital environment. It extends us, but it also extends all these other things. I mean, the car we drove here, I was mindful, because it's a late model car, that it's narking on its driver to the insurance companies.
Yeah.
So it's my wife's car, but if I drive it too fast, they're going to tell her, "Hey, you're driving too fast. You know, you're not using the lane change warning." I mean, I'm not kidding. This stuff
No, I
is
know. Yeah.
reported, and I think that's wrong, and I fight that shit too.
Yeah.
Um, but
And
anyway,
actually, that's one of the things. I'm sorry. That's one of the things about the work you did that you're expanding on. That when I first got to know you was, when you started talking about VRM and the recognition of data sovereignty, that we have over our own data and how it's being, basically destroyed by brands, right? That they don't want us to own our own data.
yeah, and brands. I mean, I I look around. Like, it's interesting to me that almost every brand known to the world was made by advertising. Now, a couple exceptions: Trader Joe's, Zara, don't advertise, but Coke, and I'm looking over here, is Sony, Technics. You know, uh, they're and yet, I mean, the most quoted thing I've written in the recent years was Madison Avenue fell asleep. Direct
Hmm.
response marketing ate its brain, and it woke up as an alien replica of itself. So nobody remembers why advertising that was addressed at populations rather than individuals worked really well, because it had a lot of waste in it. The waste in the advertising was the part that worked, and now they want to get personal all the time.
Yeah.
And I actually want to publish everything I bought from Amazon, and every place I visited, which I keep track of as Swarm. I've had Swarm for 15 years or something, and I have 12,000 or 15,000 places I've been. Okay, I could publish that, and I guarantee you, not a single advertiser will know what the hell to do with it, because they don't know what I'm going to buy next. They can't make me buy the next thing. It's insane to think that that's possible. Facebook is a bit of an exception to that. You're sharing your life all the time on Facebook. If it knows you're going to travel, it'll, knows you bought an office chair, you might want to buy another office chair. But
But that's not true, though. I mean, I bought an office chair. I don't need another office chair. So
exactly, I was just thinking that.
this repetitiveness is
I
stupid.
know it's crazy, and I mean, I have I almost never give talks anymore using slides, but I gave a couple recently where I had to show the CVS. Okay,
Hmm.
CVS is the Starbucks of pharmacies, right? There's
Yep.
one in every corner.
Yep.
They don't need all the marketing they need to do is do a good job, give
Yep.
people a good deal, have decent prices, um,
That's all.
follow.
Actually, just the price is just the only thing. You're going to go to CVS whether you want it or not.
Yeah,
You need
exactly.
it. Yeah.
Buy stuff from there. So I went looking for vitamins, and the little flags, 50% off, save on this, save on that, yellow flags hang down from each shelf over what's under it. You can't even see what's on the shelves
Hmm.
for all of the promotion. And you get a 6-foot receipt when you leave, and the
Yeah.
receipt is for a bunch of stuff all it's like $3 off of that, $4 off on that stuff you're either never going to buy, or you just bought, or if you look closely at it, you have to do it in the next 5 days or some other thing like that. It's so full
Right.
of conditionalities that the cognitive and operational overhead required to to either be a CVS or to use a CVS is so high, and it's insane. It's actually insane. They're not operating in reality. But my side of this is I don't want to try and fix CVS. I'd rather fix the market from the customer side. Give the customer better ways to make choices. Give the customer better ways to signal what they're looking for, to signal real loyalty, not coerced loyalty. To I mean, I just think that there's so much that could be done in business on the customer side that's not being done. And I've been a voice of the wilderness to some extent on that for a while, but I'm very hopeful right now about AI in that one. So
And we'll
especially,
get to that. We'll get to
yeah,
that. But one couple more questions before we get there, because that's essentially where I want to get to. But
sure.
what went wrong? I mean, when you rang the bell and in the early 2000s, I mean, the marketers got it right. This is what got us to wanting to do personalization and getting involved in online and creating online communities and Twitters and Instagram and all that. I mean, getting to that reach that you mentioned and see if they could be part of it. What went wrong? What happened? I
Well,
mean,
what went wrong is that there's just more money and more energy on the B2B side than there is on the B2C, or especially the C2B. Um, and I had thought that it's so obvious to me that if we better equip people, that will be better for markets. That the most capable customer will make the best market. And I think the belief on the business side was that the most captive customers were the most valuable ones. And a thesis I had, and it wasn't in Cluetrain, it came along later, was that free customers are more valuable than captive ones. And unfortunately, the curb weight of expertise on the customer capture side just so far outweighs what there is on the customer liberation side. I mean, pretty much, I'm almost a lone voice there. And there's a small coterie of people who are sort of there. Jamie Smith in the UK is one. Um, but there aren't many of us. And they're in the project. I started this project at the Berkman Center, now the Berkman Klein Center at Harvard in 06, called Project VRM, where
yep.
I saw there should be a vendor relationship management side that would meet customer relationship management. But customer relationship management was really all about customer records management. And it's sad and bad, but I think it's just we never got the invention on our side that mothered the necessity. We haven't had it yet. I think, and that's why I'm sort of hopeful about AI, but we'll see. I don't know. It's going to take a long
So
time.
let's shift. I mean, Alan says blog and run its course. Half agree with that part. Social media is noisy. I would say useless, but okay, let's say noisy. And then he wants to know what's next. And kind of mention AI, and I'm on the same trail, right? Trying to find the value and the best way to do AI. I mean, lots and lots and lots of hype and lots of wrong people and lots of fear and uncertainty and doubt being planted around AI right now. I mean, do you think that AI is like, I wouldn't say like, going digital, but,
It's a stage. I think there's
yeah.
first of all, it is artificial, but it's not intelligent. It's all intelligence. Human intelligence is a quality. It's not a quantity. We came up with a stupid idea of IQ tests during the age of eugenics, that assumes that you have an IQ like you have a temperature or you have a height or a weight, and it's just wrong. I mean, intelligence is a quality. It's very variable and it's very different. And all of us are learning creatures. We're learning all our lives. But I was a terrible student in school. I didn't adapt well to school at all.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother taught in the same school system, where between that and subsequent school systems and others, my known IQ scores had an 80-point range from really stupid to really smart. And the one I did best on was one where I got them all right. And that's only because they forgot to time me and I had time enough to figure them all out.
Yeah.
It's insane and I like puzzles. And so if you're good at puzzles, you're going to do well on an IQ test.
Yeah.
but my SAT scores were terrible because they were timed and I didn't do well with those. But none of those, they were all mismeasures of us. What an AI does is pattern recognition, and
Yes.
and we do pattern recognition as well. We do it all the time. I know this is a tabletop. I know this is wood. I know it's a monitor. I recognize things. I drove here. There's infinite pattern recognition that goes into that, and most of it is tacit. And tacit is what you know but can't tell, and that's 99.x% of what knowledge is. I mean, we often don't know how we'll end the sentences we start, or remember how we started the sentences we're ending, but yet get meaning across to people. And that's also pattern recognition. You listen to me, you kind of get what I'm trying to say. This is how human interaction works. Artificial intelligence is totally different. It's pattern recognition to an almost infinite degree, and it can be based on a zillion forms of input, all these data points, all these parameters. And then some real thinking goes into how do you use this pattern recognition. And they, OpenAI and Meta and Google have done and the others, Anthropic, have done a really good job of getting language down and getting coding down and getting patterns with art down, but they don't have it yet for meaning, and they may never get it for meaning.
I don't think they'll ever get it for meaning.
I don't think
That's a
they'll ever
whole
get it
different
for meaning.
discussion. Yeah.
But it's useful. So here's how I think. To me, this is, obviously businesses are going to use AI in all kinds of fabulous ways. Insurance will just go crazy over it because you could make many more inferences about people. We're seeing it here. If you can look out the back here, you see some green, according to all the insurance companies. I live on a hill in Santa Barbara here, where a safe bet for an insurance company is this is all going to burn down. It's just, and so getting so, and they're going to, and they're right now people are being canceled all over the place, and I'm sure AI has something to do with that. They're just taking a look at it, and it's not that some human beings looked at it, and AI looked at it and looked for some patterns and said, yeah, there fires are going to happen here quite often, and like I said earlier about cars, but here in my own life, I'm thinking about what are the things that it would be good for me to know. Like if you want to ask me, how much did you spend on that last vacation? Where did you go? Did you go to these stores? Where was it that I had that meal I really liked that was in Naples, Florida? Well, I could look through my calendar. I could look through other things. But if I have my own AI that is looking and correlating these things, it's going to be a lot easier. I mean, I'm looking at my book. You can't see it here, but I have bookshelves over there. I would like to take this camera here, the one that's on my phone, and shoot a picture of that and have an AI recognize the spines of all those books, do OCR and other forms of pattern recognition, or say, okay, here is a library. Here's a list of all the books in your library.
Right.
But I mean, but they're not even good at that shit yet. I mean, I pay for ChatGPT. I finally decided I'm going to pay for one of these. So see what that's like. And I said, okay, give me a list of everything Doc Searls has written in Linux Journal and in other publications that are all online, all findable. Just give me that. Give me that in either chronological or alphabetical order. And it says, I can tell you where to look for this on the web. Well, fuck you, ChatGPT, on that. I'm paying you $20 a month to be a miracle worker. If you can't work that miracle, fine.
But it's not.
But that's lame. It's incredibly lame. And I've been, I write about, among other things, the gradual death of over-the-air broadcasting, and so I'm making as a kind of almost a hobby, a compendium of photographs of transmitters sites that are going to be gone. And so I asked ChatGPT, and I've asked Midjourney, and I've asked all of them to show me AM towers, AM radio towers, medium wave in Europe, but AM towers in a field. It does not know how to do this. It thinks all towers have a lot of crap on them. AM towers don't have crap on them. The tower is what radiates. they don't know that because they don't have knowledge and they don't get the meaning.
But see, that's the key to all this, right? I mean, we put so much. We conflate. I wrote something on LinkedIn about this yesterday. We conflate everything that happens to be the same AI. AI
Yeah.
as a concept that humans understand is like the miracle, right? Like you said, I take a picture, tells me everything, and like like it looks for ancillary things and related and all that. That would be the way that I would do it. But we don't have that. We have a very, very poor model of content aggregation and recognition and probabilistic content creation, which is not AI. That's like
No.
one step up from a seventh grader writing something.
Yeah.
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 So,
Eli Pariser in his book, The Filter Bubble, which came out before The Intention Economy, like 2011. It's a great book. And one of his little chapters in there was titled A Bad Theory of You. And I think that's what business has had. And this is sort of a way of answering your earlier question of what went wrong. I think what went wrong is a bad theory of us, a bad theory of what a human being is, a bad theory of what a customer is. I mean, one of my favorite graphics of all time is your infinity symbol, which has the own cycle and the bicycle. We are owning everything I can look at here. I own. They're in that cycle. That isn't even. I mean, that's actually like this big storage area. That's what I own, and I'm buying a tiny bit at the time. But
yes.
the theory marketing has is you're buying all the time,
Yeah.
and you're in this journey, and you're in this journey. Your journey is a buying journey, and you may be, but people don't think of it as a journey. Even like I recently bought a car, and I did a lot of research on. I only had like $15,000 to spend. I didn't want to buy a new car. I wanted a good used car, but I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to fit me well. It had to be a station wagon. It had to be about the size of my old Subaru Outback that I was going to replace. It had to be kind of fun to drive and solid and fairly quiet. And I set my sights finally on like a 2017 Volkswagen Golf Sport Wagon All Track.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is my research that got to this. It was talking to a lot of friends, talking to a lot of people. Some of it was on Facebook, some of it was elsewhere. Um, and I find, one finally showed up at a car dealer, and I bought it for $15,000. But that journey it lasted a month and a half.
Mm-hmm.
I was willing to live with not buying the car, but there was nothing any seller could do to influence me on that. It just wasn't. There was no way you could look at everything I've ever bought and say, you're going to need this car. There's another faulty assumption, which is that a seller who's selling one thing, the Volkswagen dealer, for example, is going to help me with anything else. He's not going to help me buy a Ford, and
Right.
a Ford might be a better car. So the idea I'm going to get perfect advertising if I reveal everything about myself is stupid. I mean, I don't want perfect advertising. I want something
But
else.
But if you follow the breadcrumbs, I mean, you are ahead of what's coming next, right? I mean, with the Cluetrain Manifesto, spotting marketing is going to change when they understand the online consumer. With Attention Economy, which was another brilliant book, by the way, where you say, if you don't tap into the attention, you're going to lose the customer, essentially, right?
Yeah.
And our attention has been degraded to nothing. I mean, we live in 1 minute videos these days, for the love of God. I mean, it's just
Yeah, I
TikTok,
know.
Reels. Call it what
And
you
we're getting, and young people are getting news from that. And
Yeah. And the news
and
they get the last 30 seconds, they get like no nuance, no distinctions, no ancillary, nothing. They just get like one highlight with like, a bad analysis explanation. So then, it's all coming together, but then where do we go from here? Because I mean, we can paint a very, very glum picture of everything, but I think that the best is yet to come. I don't
I
think it's
do.
AI.
I am an eternal optimist.
Yeah.
I have. I mean, I think that in a way, we created Eden with the internet. I mean, it's a miracle on the order of loaves and fish. Puts that to shame. I mean, if you told like in one of my favorite movies is Blade Runner, and the Blade Runner begins with this view of Los Angeles and it says it November 2019, right?
Exactly.
And I actually gave a speech about it in October of 2019, and and it's this hellscape of buildings the size of mountains, and it's
Yeah.
dark all the time, and there are refineries, and everybody's still smoking in there, and there are phone booths, and it, and flying cars and all kinds of wonderful things. But what they didn't anticipate was not just a protocol that we would also live in this other place where we are all zero distance apart at no cost. That's you and me right now. I don't know where you are. It doesn't matter. I told you I'm in Santa Barbara. You could be in Australia. I mean,
I wish I was in Australia, my friend. No, outside of Sacramento, but yeah.
but still, there's I'm on calls almost every day where there are people from all over the place, and they're all zero distance apart. They sound great. They look great. I mean, it's. But that we would all carry around these rectangles in our pockets that are extensions of ourselves, but are also extensions of Apple and Google and their partners, whatever they are. But I'm optimistic that this infinite grace in our midst will finish having a positive transforming effect. And I say that mindful that it's entirely possible that between laws in Europe and the kind of gatekeeping that China and Russia do, and some other countries too, I'm sure. And I mean, if Section 230 gets yanked, I mean, what are the side effects of that going to be? We may have to go through worse before we get to better again. I don't know.
I try to be optimistic and think that there's not going to be any worse, but every time that I say that, I get proven wrong. So,
it's always good to bet on death, because
this is going the right way.
You may not be there to collect, but it's there. I mean, I've made this point a number of times in other places, but I mean, Earth itself and photosynthesis is also only good for another 500 million years, maybe tops, because the sun's going to get bigger and bigger and blow. And I mean, we're, life is really most of the way through its time on this planet. But then again, the optimistic view on this is that the Earth is over a third the age of the universe, and the universe is only 13 point some billion years old, and it'll be around for trillions of years. So the universe itself is a startup, and so I'm optimistic about that.
Hey, were you in Indiana for the eclipse?
I definitely was. The path of totality went right across our house, basically.
Oh.
And we went to a nearby cemetery, not because it was a cemetery, but because it's on a hill and it's clear and open, so you can see the shadow of the moon, the dark moving toward us, and then 4 minutes of totality and a little more than that.
I went to Evansville. I was in Evansville, Indiana.
You were in Ellisville?
Yeah.
Oh, you were walking distance from us almost. I mean, oh gosh.
Yeah, I had a friend. I had a friend that has an RV, and he said, "I'm going to go see the eclipse."
Wasn't it? I mean, it was great that it was crappy weather the day before. It was crappy weather the day after.
Oh no, it was
pretty
perfect.
Clear. It was great. It was a beautiful day. There were some contrails that came in the way. It was fantastic.
But the reason I'm bringing it up because it's like that's the moment you realize how freaking insignificant everything that we're talking about is. Right?
It's just if you have it, if you watch it with an open mind and an open heart, it's like, wow, there it is. I mean, a moon blocks out the sun. Like, that's cool. There's a hole in the sky right up there, and we just in the cemetery there was a bunch of musicians that came and parked about 30 feet away, and and they jammed, and more musicians came. It was fantastic, and our two grandkids were there with their parents, and we had 10 people total that came visiting. So we had 3 of our kids two of our kids and two grandkids. And my grandson, who's 16, climbed on top of one of the monuments. He watched it from up there. And afterwards he said, it was actually underhyped.
Yeah, it was my second one. I got to see the 2017.
I got 17 as well. We went to middle of
Yeah.
Wyoming for that one. Where'd you go?
I
for
was in
that?
Oregon, yeah. But
Yeah.
so the next one is in Spain in 2026. And
I
I'm
know
gonna be there
it's
too.
gonna go across Greenland, Iceland, and then
Yeah.
it's Spain. I'm very tempted.
So anyway, but the reason I brought it up is because I mean, when you put all that insignificant spec, 13.8 billions, and us trying to figure out how to sell an office chair better, right? So
Yeah.
so how do we align these things? Where do we go from here? I mean, if you were to write a manifesto today, what
Oh my
and by
God.
the way,
I'm being asked to. There's a lot of requests for a new edition of the intention economy. An interesting thing about the intention economy is that, as to tell you a quick story, I'm at the Internet Archive has a wonderful retreat kind of thing called D-Web Camp for distributed web, and they have it in Northern California, up in the Redwoods, in August. And the last one I went to, Tim Berners-Lee was there. I know Tim a little bit, not much, but I didn't want to bother him about fanboy stuff. And but there was a guy we both knew in common who it was a high energy physicist, worked for Slack. That guy's dead now. And I wanted to ask Tim a question about that guy. And I'm asking him, I go over and I say, hey, Tim, I want to ask you about this guy. And he interrupts me. He says, no, listen. Your book, The Intention Economy, fabulous book. And then he lets on, that's what inspired Solid. And Solid is this new thing that he's doing, that he and his company Interrupt are doing. And I thought, well, my gosh, it was a worse seller, but if that one guy read it, it sold. That was great.
I always say that I write for 100 people. I don't care about the rest. So I mean,
That's right. Well, David Weinberger, also of Cluetrain, says in the future we'll all be famous for 15 people. So.
And by the way, so Alan, who's a good friend of mine, he's been bugging me about writing a book about all my ranting about how AI is not AI and all that stuff. But so I'm trying to figure it out. Where to from here, because it's supposed to be my job to summarize for the enterprise where to next. So what are we doing from where we are? I mean,
well, maybe the thing with AI, and maybe this is the book you should write, is if you look at what it's not, you look at all this amazing stuff it does. Yeah. It'll give me haikus for phone numbers and all kinds of crazy stuff, but and does all this stuff that's really wonderful theater, and some of it's very useful. I know programmers that love having it do some Python for them, and then they'll finish it. But if you look at what is it never going to do that only we can do, that to me is a key thing. What will it never be that only we can be and only we can do?
That's easy. It's been the same from the beginning. I mean, intuition, imagination, leap of faith.
Yeah.
The ability to connect things that are unrelated by like you said before, it's pattern recognition, right? That's what we're doing. That we call AI. There's no way to connect patterns that are unrelatable unless you're a human that goes like, wait a minute. Like you did when you write your books. You say there's this stuff here and there's this stuff here, and how do you go from A to B without actually drawing a logical conclusion? That's what AI cannot do.
Yeah, I know. It's and it's meaning. What is meaning? That to me,
what is meaning? Yep.
Because meaning is the thing it doesn't get. What do I mean? I don't know what you mean. Or it doesn't intuit what we mean. It makes a bunch of associations, but they're. I mean, it's getting clearer and clearer to me what it can never do, and maybe that's your book. It's just like, I'm going to get ahead of this for you. It's never going to do these things, But what can only we do better once it's handling this other stuff? And I just think there are all kinds of creativity. I look at what I mean, to take beauty, for example. I was looking at, there's a, I don't know if it's DeviantArt. DeviantArt's an interesting case.
It's a great place, by the way.
It's a great place. And they have a little AI. They're probably hiring it from somebody else. But if you say, if you wanted to draw you a beautiful woman or a handsome man, or this or that, and it deals with human typicalities. It's looked at all of these things that are typical and gives you another version of that. Well, what about when our ideas of beauty get deeper or change or whatever? I mean, I'm old enough to remember when you know, um, I mean, here's an interesting thing. Like the word teenager and adolescent weren't even used until like the 30s and 40s. They didn't exist. It's sort of interesting. But when I look at fashions that, in the 50s, for example, I grew up in a time when all the parents smoked. Every I never did, but all of my friends, they all smoked. And 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 now I'm in Santa Barbara. I guarantee you, nobody's smoking in public in Santa Barbara right now. This is not happening. It's gone. Now in other parts of the world is so, but um, where's it going with that? There's
The fashion changes and the
the
beauty
fashion
changes.
changes, but practices change, smells change. What um, I'm remembering, and I'm trying to find out what the name of it is. I think we're called smudge pots. But when I was young, they didn't have road flares. They didn't even have flares at all. They didn't have lights that ran on batteries. They had these circular, something about the size of a bowling ball that was black and had like kerosene in it, and they'd light it and there was a little flame coming out the top. And that's how they marked the size of roads, Anyway, that's
So then, what's keeping your attention these days? I mean, you mentioned AM radio stations. We discussed that last time, and the local,
yeah.
local
Well,
distribution.
a sad and revealing thing is that I actually almost never listen. Not almost never. I listen to not much radio anymore because podcasts give me optionality. We listen to a podcast on the way up here.
Yeah.
We've got navigation going on the phone. We've got Apple CarPlay going through the dashboard. When the navigation interrupts the podcast pauses. Radio doesn't pause. Radio can't pause.
Yeah.
So it just so that's I see the end of what's on. We used to look at what's on. What's on now? Well, we don't care anymore. What's on? We have optionality around that. Well, what has my attention right now though is AI, but it's personal AI. It's like, what can it do for me that's really mundane? My finances, my health, my property, my relationships, my contacts, my calendar, my schedule. But it's the records of that. It's the archival side of that. I'm very big right now on the archival side of journalism. That how do all these newspapers are dying everywhere? What's happening to their archives? Their archives are records of civilization in these different localities. So
Yeah.
how do we deal with that? But to me, like, if I have AI helping me make sense of and run my life, just have a better dashboard for my life, or my lives, that include my work life, my other parts of life. I'm going to do better out in the marketplace as well. But the marketplace is, Cory Doctor wrote about this a couple of days ago. The marketplace is not just where you spend money. The marketplace is the whole agora where a lot of human activity takes place, and only some of it is around buying.
Yeah.
I went to the mall yesterday, and it's still the Santa Anita Mall in Santa Anita, California. It's still a gathering place. It's still a social place. Teenagers are still hanging out there. Kids are walking around holding hands. It's still that. But anyway, but I think if we get really good personal AI, for which we're willing to pay, doesn't, but give me the small language model that's going to work on my stuff here. It's educated. It knows what to do. It knows how to do pattern recognition because it's been trained. Thank you, ChatGPT, on a trillion things. But we're just looking at a few hundred or thousand things. And this AI in my possession running on my machine or on one I hire, working exclusively for me and not trying to spy on me all the time. I mean, give me what's going on with my car. Make me a better driver in my own way. If
Don't
I'm
give it to your insurance company. Give it to you and tell you how to do better.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Google gets traffic information from all these phones. The green and the red and the yellow lines on the map are phones. Give me that stuff. I don't want to. I don't want to carry a GPS with me. I do carry a GPS with me everywhere. Have it tell me where I've been.
Yeah.
I want that data, but it's not so I can have it. It's so my AI, my database can have it, and then AIs can work on that and figure that out. And I think once that happens, I mean, that's sort of basically what I'm caring about right now.
So we're coming to the end. So I mean, if I the interesting thing is what he just said basically summarizes everything that he's been working on for the last 20, 30 years. If you think about it, I mean, marketing, personalization, communities, intention and attention and VRM and ownership of data and all that stuff. I mean, you're asking for aggregating all these things that you've been writing. And talking about.
And also IAW is a really successful conference that I helped start. We just had one last week, 300 people. It was incredibly leveraged conference. It's the most leveraged conference I know. So I told you earlier, only 2 things I've succeeded at. That's the third one. But I think it's personal agency and independence, I think, are the main things.
Yeah.
Personal agency and independence. But there's this, when I say independence, people say, "Oh, you're being this kind of crazy libertarian." No, I think that's social as well. I mean, I think being an independent and capable person makes you a better member of society, a better family member, better club member, better student, whatever. But personal agency and independence, basically, wherever that goes, with technical help. I mean, I want technical help, but I want it to be mine and not a tentacle on some giant.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're out of time, and I'm supposed to do an hour. But I want to thank you so much.
Thank you for doing this and following.
It was a great conversation, and I think that what I learned the most is we are always spotting the things that will happen in 10 years. We just don't know how to make them happen better than giving power to the wrong people.
And Amara's law applies, which Amara didn't come up with, but he's credited with it, which is we always overestimate in the short term and underestimate in the long. We're great underestimators of the things that we're predicting, or overestimators of it, but in the long run, we're underestimating it.
Yeah.
So
thank you so much for being here. We'll come back and we'll do another great conversation. I always enjoy talking to you. Thanks everybody for coming over to the stream. We'll end the stream and we'll see you next week with Lauren Vargas. Thank you.